Okay, so this is the first lecture on the topic of selection, and this is the section 3 of this book, Animal Breeding, for Bvsc and AH second year. So, animal genetics and breeding, the topic is animal breeding, and the topic here is selection. So, this is the first part of selection, first lecture, response to selection, and first part of this first lecture. Okay, now let us start with the notes, then we'll move on to the book. So what is selection? The topic name of the chapter and section is selection. So we should know first what is selection. So it is a process of choosing superior animals based on their genetic potential and desirable traits. Simple. Process of choosing superior animals based on their genetic potential and desirable trait is called selection. So there is any desirable trait in an animal, okay, and has superior genetic potential, so that animal will be selected and other animals will be culled. Okay. Now there are two ways to bring about the genetic improvement. There are two ways to bring about the genetic improvement. First is selection, second is mating. So selection is the keystone. That is the most important factor or method to bring about genetic improvement. That is selection. Okay, what does selection do at the genetic level? So this is a question which might be a good question if it is asked in the exam. What does selection do at the genetic level? So it changes the allelic frequencies. It changes the allelic frequency or genetic frequencies. How does it change the genetic frequency? It increases the frequency of desirable alleles. And how is it able to increase the frequency of desirable alleles at the cost of decreasing the frequency of undesirable alleles? What is the meaning of frequency here? Frequency here means that how many times or what is the number in which at which or what is the number for in which this allele or gene is repeating itself. Okay, so it increases it changes the allelic or genetic frequencies. What selection at the genetic level does at selection at the genetic level, what it does, it changes the allelic frequency and it increases the frequency of the desirable alleles at the cost of decreasing the frequency of undesirable alleles. So it will increase the frequency of desirable alleles and it will cause the frequency of undesirable alleles to decrease. Okay, now this change in allelic frequency leads to changes in genetic mean of the population. Okay, this change in allelic frequency leads to the changes in genetic mean of the population. What is the meaning of this term, genetic mean of the population? Genetic mean of the population means it is the mean of the whole population, average of the whole. Mean means average, so it is the average of the population which how to define it? It is the mean or average of the population for a particular trait. That is called the genetic mean of the population. Okay. So now, if we talk about selection for both qualitative and quantitative traits, so it is same for both qualitative and quantitative traits. So equal same. But if we talk about for quantitative traits, so quantitative traits, what are the characteristics of quantitative traits? These are controlled by large number of genes and hence the environmental effect. Environmental deviation also is included in the quantitative traits. So now since these quantitative traits are controlled by large number of genes and these also have the effect of environment on them. So thus the changes for such traits gene frequency cannot be observed. We already know that the quantitative traits we cannot know the effect of each gene and the effect of environment. We can only measure the effectiveness of that particular selection of that particular trait with the help of the phenotype. Okay, with the help of phenotype. So that is the meaning of this. So quantitative traits we know controlled by large number of genes and has the effect of environment also. So thus changes for such traits gene frequencies cannot be observed. Why? Because these are controlled by large number of genes, also has the effect of environment, so their changes cannot be observed. Thus for quantitative traits the effectiveness is studied at the level of phenotype. So at the level of phenotype we study the effectiveness. Okay, now types of selection. So there are two types of selection, that is natural and artificial selection. So if we talk about natural selection, force acting here is the survival of the fittest. We all know about this force, that is the survival of the fittest. So the cumulative effect of natural selection is to make the population well adapted to its prevailing environment. So what is the meaning of definition of natural selection? So natural selection is defined as a selection which is done naturally by the environment, not without any interference of humans. Okay, so that is the meaning of natural selection. So natural selection force acting is the survival of the fittest, and cumulative effect of natural selection is to make population well adapted to its prevailing environment. Okay, and artificial selection process of choosing the individual to become parents of the next generation. So here human intervention, complete human intervention is there. In artificial selection, human intervention is there. So humans select or breeders select which individual should become the parents of the next generation. Okay, This choice is based on the standards laid down by the breeders, obviously. Now, artificial selection is a fast process. So, what is the difference between natural and artificial selection? So, there are quite a few differences. So, for example, natural selection works due to forces of nature. Natural selection, as the name suggests. And artificial selection works due to the efforts of breeders or humans. Okay. Now, next is survival of the fittest is the main force, and survival of main force is a standard laid by down the breeder in artificial selection. Okay. Natural selection, a very slow process. Artificial selection, a very fast process, and a relatively fast process. Natural selection can occur at any stage from zygote to adulthood, and artificial selection can be conducted only after trait of interest has been recorded or recognized. Origin and development of new animal species is the example of natural selection. Development of breeds of animals for economic use is the example of artificial selection. Okay. Now there are three forms of selection, not basis, not method of selection, only three forms of selection: stabilizing, diversifying or disruptive, and directional. There are three forms of selection: stabilizing, diversifying or disruptive, and directional. So if we talk about these three forms, so we will talk about these graphs later together only. So stabilizing selection. So here we select the individual which are around the population mean. This is the population mean. So this is the mean. This dash or line is the mean. So here we select the individual which are near or around the population mean. Okay, and discard the individual with extreme phenotype. So extreme phenotype, these represent the discarded individual, these represent the selected individuals or animals. So here we select the individual or animal which are around the population mean and discarding the individual with extreme phenotype. Okay, now it helps in keeping the mean of the population stable over generation, because we are selecting the individuals nearer to the mean, so that is why the mean of the population is being stable over the years. Okay, the individuals being selected around the mean only. Diversifying or disruptive selection, here individuals are selected from the two extremes of the distribution. So diversifying, as the name says, disruptive, so you are disrupting the mean. This is the mean, this is the mean. So the individuals are selected from either of the extremes, from both of the extremes. So both of the extremes, from both of the extremes, the individuals are selected. Okay, and this selection form is only seen in laboratory animal. It is very rarely applied to farm animals. This can be an important question as an MCQ, an objective paper. So next is directional selection. Third form is directional selection. So directional selection, here the animals are chosen from one direction, that is from high performing animals. So from one direction only the animals are chosen. So these animals are chosen here. Okay, these are the animals which are chosen here. So high performing animals are chosen here, selected, and it is the most commonly applied form of selection in farm animals. This is very important point. Now there are two definitions important in this directional selection, this directional form of selection. Two definitions are important, that is selected group and culled animals. Selected group, these are the individuals chosen to become parents of next generation and are superior over the next generation. Okay, over the parental generation, and next should not be there, the word parental should be there. So selected group, these are the individuals chosen to become the parents of next generation. Why are we selecting any particular individual? We are selecting that particular individual because we need that particular individual has genetic superiority over the rest of the population, and thus that individual should become the parent of the next generation. Okay, so that represents the selected group. And what is represented by culled animals? These are constituted by the remaining animals that are not selected. Simple. Okay. Okay. Now, next topic is genetic gain or response. Okay, so my camera had stopped. So we will predict the genetic gain at two levels, that is delta G per the genetic gain prediction, genetic gain at generation level and yearly basis, annual level. So delta G per generation is H square into S, that is H square is heritability into selection differential S. Right, okay. Now, so if all the individual of a population are retained for breeding, then selection is negative. Selection is not present. Then the S and delta G is 0, because no individual has been selected. Thus there is no selection differential. So S is 0. That is why delta G is also 0. Okay. Now phenotypic superiority, as we know, environmental plus genotypic plus environmental superiority. Genetic gain per year. Genetic interval. Generation interval, it is the time represented by capital L. It is the time in between the birth of parents and birth of the replacement, that is their offspring. So replacement can also be called as offspring. Okay, so L is equal to average age of parents when their offspring who are to become the parents of next generation are born. Okay, so delta G per year is equal to H square into S upon L, and delta G per generation is equal to H square into S. And this equation delta G is equal to H square into S upon L is the key equation for genetic gain, of Breeder's equation. Okay, so this was from my notes. Now we will discuss this from the book. So this is the unit 3, section 3, that is selection. So the topic here is there are two broad ways to bring about genetic improvement, that is selection of individual and mating a crossing system. Selection response to selection. To the individual traits, the quantitative traits are controlled by a large number of genes and further modified by the environmental factor. The changes in gene frequency for such trait cannot be observed. The effectiveness of selection for quantitative traits has therefore to be studied at the level of phenotype. Okay. Next point is this, that natural versus artificial selection. So these are the differences. Three forms of selection: stabilizing, diversifying, directional. And now this is the basics. So response to selection or genetic gain. So what is this? Response to selection or genetic gain, that is the average performance of individual, but S is equal to PS minus P0. Okay, and we have discussed all of this. Now see this diagram, where the point is written, directional selection thus produces permanent or long lasting results. So it is producing permanent or long lasting results. The results are being accumulated over the generations. So this is the meaning of this point. So prediction per generation h square into s, and prediction per year h square into s upon l. Okay, equation for genetic gain or breeder's equation. That's all for today. Thank you.